I remember completing Just Cause 3 2 years ago. I remember watching General D. Ravioli cook himself alive. And I distinctly remember thinking, after a personal story arc like this, Rico's tale finally comes to an end. Then the trailer for Just Cause 4 dropped. For all the flashy cinematics the trailers flaunted, the game looked to me like Just Cause 3 but with a touch of natural disaster, as though Rico wasn't enough of one himself. Come release day and the Steam reviews say it is so much worse than that. Graphics? Gameplay? Stability? The game felt like a bland shore given the games that existed before it, and a lot of the changes that were made felt half-baked and detracted from the steady foundation of its immediate predecessor. Even so, is all that really enough to warrant an average review rating of 35% on Steam? Look at what you're doing. You're putting it on level with Autobahn Police Simulator 2. Just look at it. Look at it. You see this? This mass of digital disappointment is what you're equating it to. What is behind you? Can I? Oh. I get that Steam review aggregates aren't exactly an entirely objective metric to go by, but 35%? Come on, guys. Well, valid or not, it was intriguing. What was just so wrong about this game? Shitty performance? Subpar visuals? Mind-numbing gameplay? No, I've always had an iffy memory, and I wanted to refresh it to make as accurate an analysis as possible. So I beat Just Cause 3 all over again last week, and then beat Just Cause 4 right after that. And if I were to discuss the matter of being burned out by playing them back to back, I'd graph my time spent to regret ratio as such. It's hard to ignore the sudden drop in mental anguish right past the midway point. What the hell happened here? To explain, I'll have to dive into the various facets of the game, scrutinize the changes, and compare and contrast it to its predecessor where needed. And if frame rate hasn't made it evident already, I played this game on a PC with a keyboard. So anytime I discuss controls, don't mind what I'm saying unless you use a keyboard too. And with that being said, let's begin with the first thing everyone can judge a newly announced game on. I firmly believe that lighting and post-processing can make any game look great. Reshade, a post-processing injector, is a testament to this. Modify the levels, sharpness, and color balance a bit, and Assassin's Creed Unity goes from looking like this to this. Now this kind of modification is highly subject to opinion. While I may love it, you may not feel the same way. And this is where Just Cause 4 vacillates between two extremes. Just Cause 3 had a lovely color palette, saturated and bursting with a variety of hues. It was always pretty to look at. Problem is, this is what you were looking at 95% of the time. The maps look the same all over, the only variety comes by way of landscape, from plains to archipelagos. Archipelagos? Archipelago? Fuck it, just pretend I know how to pronounce that.
Archipelago.
That word. You'd seldom ever find yourself intentionally loitering around unique regions like the mountains or the volcano. Just Cause 4, on the other hand, switches from a neutral color palette to a much warmer one, and in the absence of direct light sources, it resembles a month-old baguette, flat, bland, and unappealing as hell. But when the lights kick in, oh boy is it a beaut. The haze over the environment, the blinding sands, the light bending around foliage, and the glorious mountains. It's hard to argue that the game looks bad, but any amount of close inspection reveals a myriad of objective flaws. The textures are largely rubbish, grass, bushes, and crops are no longer tessellated, meaning they don't flatten out as you move over them, and the water wouldn't look out of place in San Andreas. The explosions were neuter too. They're brighter, sure, but the smoke they leave behind dissipates almost instantaneously, and the explosion itself doesn't shoot out fragments for added effect anymore. I can only assume they were toned down for performance reasons, and the only reason I can think of for the water being as bad as it is to accommodate the variety of extreme weather that occasionally checks in on the country of Follies. Ultimately, that's what a lot of the downgrades boil down to, accommodating the weather system and improving performance at all costs. But that aside, I don't think the game looks as bad as some people claim it does. However, I do understand where those who say it looks worse than Just Cause 3 are coming from. At best, it looks about as good as Just Cause 3, but at its worst, Just Cause 4 fails to even meet the standards set by the series' second entry. A solid mix of chaos and traversal, limited only by your creativity, using the tools at your disposal. That just about sums up the entire series in a nutshell. It's a fairly simple principle to keep in mind when designing these games. But with multiple entries in a game franchise, it brings with it the inevitable problem of escalation. How do you top the story from last time? How do you outdo the batshit insane crap you pulled off the previous game? It is here that Just Cause 4 primarily falters. It's a discombobulated mess of systems that don't exactly play very well together for an efficient result. And that's while they're not being shallow, meaningless gimmicks. But that's not to say it's entirely devoid of any good additions. The depth added to the tether system opens up new possibilities to tailor your playstyle, Some may say it's overly complex and pointless, but I doubt the goal was to have 3 continuously changing loadouts. Instead, you have 3 distinct ones to accomplish various tasks you, as an individual, would like them to. For me, this meant one loadout to lift stuff with balloons, one that functioned like a standard Just Cause 3 tether, and one to fill the gaping hole where my infinite Bavarian mines should have been. And that third loadout solved about 99% of my problems. I felt pretty satisfied knowing I'd figured out a far more efficient way to blow shit up. But this ties into the game's first big issue. Just Cause 4 pushes the player towards using their ingenuity to solve problems and mess with the world more than any previous game did. But when I have one tool that does the job an order of magnitude better than any other, I have little incentive to use anything else. I feel conflicted about whether or not the DLC wingsuit should even exist, because once upgraded, you don't need to rely on any other method of traversal. I was never hurting for weapons that would violate the Geneva Convention when I had an infinite supply of portable cluster bombs on me at all times. Until that point, I was at the very least still somewhat reliant on choppers, planes, and RPGs. But when I'm far more dependent on a wingsuit than I am on a railgun for dealing damage, I think there's some rethinking to be done. You can't entirely blame the player for this. Most of us naturally gravitate towards the path of least resistance. You give me a checklist of shit to do and I'll be prioritizing efficiency over creativity in the long term. And speaking of checklists, let's talk about liberation. Remember when liberating regions involved blowing stuff up and raising the chaos level? Well, that's been thrown out of the window for missions that upon first sight seem like an interesting addition, until you realize that each scenario has been copy-pasted at least 4 times apiece. Sweet Christ in a Chrysler, if you went numb by the time you reached Just Cause 3's 3rd sector, you'll likely be out cold from sheer boredom halfway through this. Blatantly copy-pasted missions are far more grating than just being told to destroy stuff at a base or a town in whatever order I please and however I want to. Because repetitive as they may be, the latter can be approached however you want. It serves the core of freedom that defines the Just Cause series far better than performing a series of actions in the exact order prescribed by the game over and over again. And the vast majority of these objectives involve wave defense, holding your ground in a single spot, or protecting a target who navigates as though he isn't on a timer. It isn't just a nuisance, it runs straight fucking counter to the concept of having freedom. To top it all off, as part of escalating the intensity of gameplay, the enemy spawns are far more ridiculous, often seemingly popping into existence just out the corner of your eye at a rate that would make a Gambian housewife jealous. If you're defending a console that's being hacked, there will always be at least 6 distinct guys firing at you unless you can kill them faster than the game is shitting them out. The icing on the cake is that there's also at least 2 choppers on you at any given time. And their AI has a severe case of I can't stop fucking firing rockets at you for 2 seconds! Oh, and if you take them out, 2 more spawn in almost immediately. Excuse me? The fuck? Did I miss a memo or something? I was told to sit in a small area for 2 minutes. What's the big idea constantly spawning trigger-happy rocket choppers? Did anyone playtest this? Did anyone take their advice? There's no wanted level to grade the degree of adversity you face. The game is a metronome, oscillating between soothing serenity and Jesus fuck help! And good fucking god is in a miserable experience. AI aside, I don't think the concept of objectives itself is inherently bad. Remember how police stations and VIPs used to be in isolated parts of liberating towns and bases? Why not implement these objectives in a similar manner? Keep the chaos objects and have them mandated for liberation as usual, but fill different areas with side objectives you do alongside that to supplement the chaos. Fuck it, let's come up with some ideas right now. Keep the wanted level at 5 stars for a minute straight and the base commander shows up in a unique vehicle. Be allowed to hack the railgun and Vulcan cannons by paying attention to their cables, following them and then hacking the console at the end. Give a base some 10 to 20 choppers and make it a goal to destroy all of them as you lay waste to the place. And give players the option to take them out before they've even taken off, like blow up a hangar or something. There's plenty of ideas to be explored that are conducive to the gameplay loop of progressively dominating and destroying a military region. It maintains narrative cohesion, adds more variety to the checklist, and gives you the freedom to proceed with the process of liberation however you see fit. Assuming, of course, that you're even allowed to liberate said area. The decision to utilize this weird frontline mechanic to gate progress and give some semblance of structure to it is actually kinda clever. Emphasis on the kinda. Each region has one of the aforementioned side missions associated with it. Complete the mission and you can now advance the front line of the rebels by expending squads and mark the area as cleared. Once an area is cleared, the squad requirement for liberating the adjacent regions decreases by 1. Once it goes past 0, you gain squads for clearing the area instead. A bit contrived, but I'll roll with it. In theory, it gates access to certain missions by having those missions require certain areas to be liberated beforehand, or by making it so that you can only advance the front line from one specific region. This system allows the developers to funnel you down particular paths and block certain missions until certain requirements are met. And it's mathematically sound, so it's logically impossible for you to ever get stuck being unable to clear any areas. Yeah, that's right. Branches of math can actually be useful. In games. High school me would be so mad. That being said, it's a problem here because the process of clearing those regions involves doing those missions and dealing with over-enthusiastic AI. So the whole thing feels like an extended chore more than anything else. It doesn't help that the PC controls are rubbish. If the mouse was milk, the menus would be lactose intolerant. A number of actions can't even be rebound. Apparently some PC players didn't even realize the cutscenes were skippable. Fun fact, they are. The default back button is left control. That's the button you hold down to skip cutscenes. No other key works. It's about as intuitive as having to steer a new car with your feet because that's what the manufacturer thought made sense. Also, the grapples and tethers feel wonky as all hell. What used to be instantaneous is now delayed whenever you're moving. From what I can tell, it seems to be buffering inputs for a while before deciding on whether or not you intended to grapple somewhere or tether to objects. Which makes for constant frustration by way of grapples when you intended to tether, and tethers where you intended to grapple. And why in God's name can't you smoothly roll out of a wingsuit position like you could before? Now the only way to land is to hold on the air brakes until you drop straight down. Why? No matter how slowly you're going, touching down before the animation just plays you a concussion. Did Rico somehow get less skilled since the last game? Must have been a grandma's cooking. And last but not least for this segment, the upgrades and challenges. They were so inconsequential I actually forgot to add them to my script until I'd finished the rest of it. I genuinely liked the gear challenges in Just Cause 3, except the ones that involved ground vehicles. The driving was so atrocious it felt like borderline RNG. But demonstrating your skill in the areas you wanted to focus on let you expand further down those skill paths. Though once I had all the upgrades I needed in an area, I just stopped playing those challenges altogether. Except the wingsuit challenges, I could do those for days. Now Just Cause 4 doesn't have any of those upgrades, you already start off with everything you had by the end of the last game. Except rolling out of a wingsuit apparently. Instead, you complete one of 3 color-coded challenge sets to unlock mods for your tethers. And I just got 1 or 2 gears in each area and left it at that. I didn't bother with any of their side missions or mini challenges because of how repetitive and shallow they were. Except Judy Garland's. I love me some over-the-top action in my over-the-top video game. But no amount of mission-based hyperbole will help me forgive what they did to the wingsuit challenges. When did this become harder than this? So it controls like ass on a keyboard, the gameplay loop is bland and poorly thought out, combat is aggravating, AI is bullshit, side missions are dull as all hell, the graphics are bipolar. So what's left to discuss? Oh yeah, the one thing everyone plays Just Cause games for. The plot. Bombastic, over the top, cliched but self-aware, the stories in the series were always better suited to popcorn rather than analysis. The question then is, what would you rather eat that popcorn to? The framing and choreography of scenes in Just Cause 4 is a massive step up from its predecessors. What once felt like a cartoon and then evolved into the uncanny valley of human interaction has finally evolved into something I'd unironically describe as cinematic. The trailers speak for themselves. When it comes to pre-rendered material focused on showing off everything but the gameplay, they're some of the best I've seen. A lot of the cutscenes wouldn't be out of place in a campy, self-aware action comedy. A shame then that they're ruined by the god-awful visuals reserved for them. In-game cutscenes are rendered at what look like the lowest settings, and the pre-rendered ones somehow manage to look even worse than that. That's not how pre-rendered cutscenes work, Avalanche, they're supposed to look better than the game. This isn't your average everyday stupid, this is developer working on a big publisher stupid. The closest I can come to a sensible explanation is that maybe the cutscene files the game shipped with were just test renders rather than the final cuts. But even then, if that were the case, that's still some advanced stupid. The story is a lot grittier than usual this time around. The theme of family and familiarity from Just Cause 3 has turned into one of mystery, while still holding on to the remnants of the third game that made it funny.
I suppose I could...
Perfect! We'll get your agent a copy of the contract. You don't have an agent. We'll get you an agent. We're gonna do amazing things together, doll.
Okay.
It's as grandiose in its set pieces as Just Cause 2, but retains the campy humor of Just Cause 3. And while it may not be as funny as the latter, which I blame entirely on the lack of a certain Murio, it still knows just how silly it is, and is still capable of having some fun with itself. Gems of character like this.
Mario, did you leak the plans to Sheldon like we discussed?
Oh, you should have seen me.
Sheldon, Rico wanted me to tell you that we're attacking the power plant.
Just so you know.
Gracias, compadre.
Are now replaced with this.
Stick to what we talked about.
See, okay. The tornado that hit Nueva was the capital 10 years ago. Mira Vendaval a few months later. My plane all destroyed by tornadoes. Tornadoes controlled by the reptilians.
Mierda, Cesar.
So yeah, they're fun in spite of themselves. If not for the drop-dead awful render quality, I'd say these could have been my favorite scenes in the series, period. And that brings us to the final segment of this analysis. The star of the trailers, the big kahuna. The shocking disappointment? The saving grace of this game turned out to be the last nail in its poorly textured coffin. The storms are all nothing short of nuisances, ranging from mosquito bite levels of annoyance with the sandstorm to aggravating roommate levels of exasperation with the lightning storm. Exhibit A. The lightning storm nags you the way an Indian parent pushes their kids to learn the multiplication tables up to times 20 by the time they're 10. No, I don't have issues. Lightning naturally strikes stuff that's metallic and higher up, but inevitably, and for gameplay reasons, you'll often find yourself at the receiving end of a bolt of lightning. You can dodge it by simply grappling away, and it telegraphs itself ages in advance, so it's not exactly hard. But if you're wingsuiting, well, there's no way out of dodging it unless you close it and grapple away, and then continue wingsuiting, only for it to target you again not 10 seconds later. Also, air vehicles and parachutes are no-go because turbulence. Essentially, all it does is cut out the entire traversal part of the game, save for the grappling hook, and whether or not it does anything against your enemies is purely up to chance. And believe you me, chance is not on your side with this game. Exhibit B, the sandstorm. Makes stuff harder to see for you, makes the AI completely blind. That is, unless you've aggroed them. Then suddenly, they gain the eyesight of the sand people. Also, I feel like they've refactored a lot of the assets from 2015's Mad Max game. Have a look. Do they not look almost identical? Even the sandstorm looks like its half-brother. Or twin. Yeah, twin's better. Exhibit C. The tornado. Doesn't really pose very much of a threat to you, and 9 times out of 10 it doesn't pose any threat to the Black Hand either, because it's busy hanging around a river somewhere. And finally, Exhibit D, the blizzard. It's a snowstorm with occasional bouts of lightning. So the first 2 storms combined with a new coat of paint. Yeah, it's a bit shit. I remember reading somewhere before playing this game that after completing a region I'd get control of these storms. For whatever reason, I thought that meant I'd get a device that would summon one wherever I was. Similar to how taking down FOWs in Just Cause 3 unlocked them as repurposed weapons for you. But the game already had weapons that sort of fill that role. The lightning gun, which takes way too long to kill anything. The wind gun, which is almost completely ineffective. The railgun's cool too, easily the most useful in my opinion. And as for the storms, yeah, you can summon them from one specific point on the map in each region. I'd very much rather just have a small localized version of the storm instead. Like a device that fires a bolt of lightning that you can target the way you would an airstrike, or a large sand smoke screen grenade launcher. Really, Avalanche, it's not hard to come up with ideas. I'm creatively bankrupt and I can do it. Instead, we have this. Speaking of, why would you ever want to summon these? They are active annoyances. They make everyone involved miserable. The only one I'd willingly summon would be the tornado, because at least you can toy with the physics on that one. But even if you wanted to catch a glimpse of the other storms, summoning them is the only reliable way to go. Excluding the one-time scripted missions where I encountered them, after 30 plus hours of gameplay, I only naturally stumbled across 4 storms, period. Maybe there's always a storm at some point on the map and I just happen to continuously miss all of them. But it's still a fact that I only ran into the key selling points of this game on 4 distinct occasions. And frankly, I'm happy I never saw them more often. In my Far Cry 5 review analysis, I recall saying that it was a perfectly fine and fun game, but got a no from me because of how much better its predecessors were. And I'm afraid I can't say the same for Just Cause 4. It's clear to me why the Steam reviews for this game are so negative. There isn't a single department this game wholly excels in. Sections of it seem so devoid of any actual thought or consideration for the player that it amazes me it was still released as is. I highly doubt Just Cause 4 truly deserves the rating it has on Steam right now, but I do know this. Having played it, I can still go back and enjoy Just Cause 2 and 3, but I can never enjoy Just Cause 4.
If you don't mind.
Everybody come check this out. Oh, you all doubted me, but now I have proof. Proof that the reptilians have infiltrated the highest levels of government. Proof that Oscar Espinosa hails from the Alpha Draconis system. Proof that no human could have created. Is this a USB port? Is this a USB port?